This podcast is brought to you by the good people at Living with Hemophilia, the online hemophilia community brought to you by Bayer. Living with Hemophilia is the destination of choice for a plethora of useful info, like medical and non-medical tips, helpful advice, information on programs for all ages and stages, leadership opportunities and initiatives, sewing patterns, and videos, the best videos. And because it's on the internet, it's easy to find. Simply type livingwithhemophilia.com into your search bar, and there you are. Thank you, internet. Join Bayer's community of fellow hemophilia patients, caregivers, and advocates as we put the live in living with hemophilia. You can even like us on Facebook. That's even better because you can use emojis on our Facebook page and receive all our latest updates. So check out Living with Hemophilia. And before you wish happy birthday to that friend from 3rd grade or share a funny meme about cats and Mondays, head over to Facebook and like Bayer's Living with Hemophilia page. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Amy Board. I am your host, and this is episode 30. Can you believe it? We made it. We made it to 30 episodes. We've had 30 experts, 30 topics over the years, and to celebrate that small milestone, we're going to celebrate a gigantic milestone in our community. We're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Camp Bold Eagle. Camp Bold Eagle is a summer camp specifically for children and for teenagers that have bleeding disorders that is run by the Hemophilia Foundation of Michigan. And Camp Bold Eagle is the oldest, the longest standing summer camp in our country. And they have been the leaders in camp development, and all of us camp nerds across the country have always enjoyed working with the staff from Michigan as they really do incredible programming. And so we brought the team on. We brought the team on to celebrate this incredible milestone, but also I think to shine a light on the beauty and the uniqueness of the summer camp program here in the bleeding disorders community. Most chapters, most local communities have a camp opportunity for families and for kids and for teenagers, whether it's a family camp, whether it's a teen retreat or a teen camp or a teen leadership weekend or a full-blown week-long summer camp where parents literally get to ship their kids off to summer camp. In my humble opinion, it's one of the most important things that we do. I wanted to celebrate it, and I wanted to bring attention to the summer camp program. I know there might be some parents listening to the podcast that are thinking about perhaps sending their kids to summer camp, or maybe your kid is too young to send to summer camp, but just thinking about having your kid with hemophilia going off to a place where you will not be in their presence for 5 days. I know there are some parents that are like, I'm counting down the minutes, and there are some that are terrified. The genius about bleeding disorder camps in particular is 9 times out of 10, the clinical staff is your HTC staff. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to, have the kids without parents, without their parental figures around, and to have that peer-to-peer interaction, to see another kid infuse, and all of a sudden that kid can say, you know what, I can do that. But also to have them develop these relationships with their clinicians in a setting that takes down all of the clinical barriers. You know, they're seeing their nurses and their PTs running around in shorts and fanny packs, and it's just this really wonderful, very unique place where there's some acceptance of their hemophilia and their von Willebrand's disease and their bleeding disorder that happens at camp. It's a really lovely thing. I think bleeding disorders can be very isolating. 9 times out of 10, if you're a child with hemophilia, you're the only one in your school that has hemophilia or von Willebrand's disease. We speak in a weird language, you know. We speak in butterfly needles and bleeds and factor, and no one has any idea what these words mean. And the second that you go to camp, imagine the power of meeting someone who is your age, having the exact same thing, and having this dialogue where you don't have to over-explain something, you don't have to worry about whether or not you're weird or how they're going to take it or if they're going to think less of you. Imagine being 8 years old and meeting a 17-year-old that has the exact same thing that you do, that has a routine with infusions, and they're going to show you, they're going to let you practice on their own hands, on their own arms, with their own veins. The power of that, I cannot begin to describe the power of it. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I got involved in the hemophilia community because of summer camp. It was just one of the most impactful moments for me, realizing how isolating chronic disease can be and how incredibly inspiring it can be to just have someone who understands. And so today on the podcast, we just want to celebrate it. I am so honored to have my camp colleagues on the podcast today to talk about their milestone, and I can't wait for you to hear about their evolution and some of the programming that they do. Before we get to our Michigan team, I just want to remind everybody to listen to the Bloodstream podcast this month. Great stuff, really, really, really good stuff. Patrick actually dives into some pretty intense articles and conversations about gun control and about some of the physician community getting involved in that issue, which is really intriguing. And Natalie actually talks a little bit about CBD oil. I know we've all started to hear it in terms of medical marijuana and those things, but CBD is very specific, and she's starting to spark that conversation. So there's really great stuff. So make sure to check that out. I also want to give my congrats to the Bombardier Blood documentary that shares the story of Chris Bombardier's story, climbing Mount Everest. Bombardier Blood actually is going to open the Rare Disease Film Festival here in the fall. We're very excited about that. We're very proud of that film. So make sure to follow Bombardier Blood on Instagram and on Facebook so you can get the latest updates about when that film will be available to all. And lastly, I just want to give a huge congrats to all of our Teen Impact Award nominees. We are so proud of you. We're so excited that some of you will be able to join us at the awards ceremony at the Bleeding Disorder Conference here in October in Anaheim. We're so excited and we're so proud of you. So congratulations to all of those awardees. I'd love to hear your questions and your thoughts for future podcasts, so make sure to hit me up. You can email me at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. You can also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Bordo87. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Bayer Pharmaceuticals for sponsoring Ask the Expert. Without Bayer's support, conversations like the one I'm having today would not happen, so we are so grateful. So let's get to it. So excited. My guests today are the team from the Hemophilia Foundation of Michigan and their partnering HTCs, and they are going to give us the history and the evolution of Camp Bold Eagle and all of the camping programs that have actually stemmed from Camp Bold Eagle. They have a fantastic program, and hopefully it will get you very excited as we wind down our summer camp season, excited for next year to contact your local chapters, contact your local camps and some of your leadership in your community to find out where you guys can send your kids and your teenagers to a camping program. So grab a cup of coffee and let's have ourselves a conversation. I am your host, Amy Board, and welcome to episode 30, or our summer camp special episode of the Ask the Expert podcast. All right, welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm joined today by the team at the Hemophilia Foundation of Michigan and the Children's Hospital of the Michigan HTC to talk about camp, to talk about their 50th anniversary of Camp Bold Eagle. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited that you guys are here. I'd love to go around and do some introductions. You know, sometimes when I listen to podcasts, it takes me halfway through to realize who's talking. So I just wanted to help our listeners a bit. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll go around. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your role at camp. And Sue, let's start with you. Lady, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Oh, I'm happy to. So this is Sue Lurch. I'm the executive director at HFM. And I actually went to camp back in the 80s to the mid-90s when I was here the first time around, before I even had kids. And then when my daughter was born, she went to camp when she was a little older. When she was 5, she learned all about bleeding disorders, even though neither of us had one. And her name is Jenna, and she's now very involved with HFM because she happens to be married to Tim Wicks, who you'll meet shortly. And so she learned about hemophilia and von Willebrand's disease, and now she's part of the family in a different kind of way. The camp started back in 1969, and it's the oldest and I think one of the largest, if not the largest still, camps in the world for people with bleeding disorders, and we're really, really proud of that. And my involvement is now I just kind of come and visit. I've become a little wimpy about, staying in the cabins and all that stuff that I used to do. But I love the program, and you're going to love hearing from all the folks that really make it happen at this point in our 50th anniversary. I can't even believe it. That means I'm really old too. So anyway, there you go.
Fantastic, Sue. Since you mentioned him, Tim, let's jump to you. Tim Wicks, will you introduce yourself?
Hi there. So I'm Tim. I'm the camp director for Camp Bold Eagle, along with our other camps, Eagle Outpost, Eagle Quest, and Eagle Expedition. And I also have severe hemophilia A. I came to Eagle Outpost, which is our traveling camp for teens, 14 and 15-year-olds, when I was 15 years old. And I hadn't done anything with the Hemophilia Foundation before then. But then I just kept coming back as a CIT and then as a counselor. And when the previous director went back to school, then I applied and found the place where I love working and just have the absolute best job in the world. And yes, I did meet Jenna there, and that's Sue's daughter, and she was the arts and crafts director. And we did not get together at camp. We didn't start dating while we were at camp. That was outside of camp. So for any potential campers that are out there, it was all outside of camp. There's no relationships at camp.
Oh, right.
Right. We like to say that. That's wonderful. I love that, though. I think so many friendships and, relationships have blossomed at camp. So that's really fun to have, to hear that story of how you guys have a root in camp. I love that. Let's jump to Annie. Annie Phillips, will you introduce yourself and let our listeners know a little bit about your role at camp?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Annie Phillips, and I am the social worker at Children's Hospital in Detroit at the Hemophilia Treatment Center. I've been there for almost 5 years, and I love coming to camp, and I love being a part of it, and I think it's so important for me to be with the children outside of the medical environment and in an environment where they feel safe and they're having fun, and I love helping out at camp and doing what I can, and I also do like a health education that they call the High C, and just help with various things around camp with psychosocial needs.
Wonderful. The other thing Annie's done, Amy, just FYI, is we have a program with Annie and HFM on for swimming, and that kind of developed out of camp and finding that kids really needed that. And and the other thing that Annie has done is done a lot of work with patients, families, to encourage parents to let their kids come to camp.
That's a big one. I think through the swim program, we have gotten a lot of kids to be able to come to camp because HFM is involved with the swim program, and our the associate camp director comes every week, and so he gets to know the parents, and then the parents feel more comfortable with sending their kids to camp.
That's great. I can't wait to dive into that a little bit more into our conversation. That is great. And I have always said that I don't think our camp in Colorado would happen without our social workers. I mean, they are the forefront of trying to get those kids into that experience, get the parents rather feel comfortable. So hats off to those social workers. Let's jump over to Sarah. Sarah, will you introduce yourself a little bit and your role at camp?
Hi, my name is Sarah Procario, and currently I work at HFM as the Advocacy and Communications Manager. However, I'm staying on this phone call today because I actually got involved with the Michigan Bleeding Disorders community back in 2014 through camp. I found myself free for the summer in 2014, and my sister, who is affected and has been working at the camp for a while, mentioned that she thought I should come. So I took a step into that weird world of camp. I had no idea what it was about. And since then, I've been pretty hooked. And that eventually led to my job here at HFM to continue working with the community.
Sarah, I love that. That's how I got hooked in this community too. I had no idea what I was doing. I love that. And then finally, our camper, Corey, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you are involved in camp?
Hey, y'all. So I am Corey Tipsworth. I've been coming to Camp Bold Eagle since I was 5, 32 now. I am currently the evening program director at Camp Bold Eagle. I set up all the fun games at night. Yeah, it's just been a great experience and led to a lot of other camps that I work at currently as well, like Alaska and Arizona. Also do stuff with Gut Monkey, so that's a lot of fun.
Fantastic, with Pat Torrey at Gut Monkey. That's awesome. It is such an honor to have all of you on this podcast, not only to celebrate the 50 years of Camp Bold Eagle, but also to celebrate the special beauty of summer camp that I know we all agree on. This interview could kind of go in so many different directions, but I'd personally love to start at the beginning. And so I guess my first question to the group is, take me back. Why was Camp Bold Eagle started? What were the needs of the community at the time, and why was camp in particular the solution?
Well, this is Sue, and I'll share my perspective just because I'm the oldest one on this phone call. And
Sue, you just outed yourself as the oldest one.
I know. I am. Hey, I own it. I know. I'm a grandma now. I'll bet.
Own it.
I own it. So what happened was there, here in Michigan at any rate, is there was a particular physician. He just passed away a couple years ago, John Penner. He had been at the University of Michigan, and he was really involved in getting he was a hematologist, obviously, and he was integral in getting the HFM started back in 1956 with volunteers. And then in 1969, he just decided, along with the people at HFM, that it would be really important for young guys with hemophilia to get together and support one another. And he just had his HTC, which wasn't really known as an HTC back then, but they came together and decided to create what they called Camp Bold Eagle Highlands back then. And he really decided that it was important to have people in a different setting than a medical setting, and started this program. And it was just amazing. And really, a lot of aspects of it have stayed the same over the years. The concept back then was can do, and it still is, trying to create an environment where people with hemophilia could meet other people who were affected by hemophilia, now other bleeding disorders, and learn from one another, see what they could do rather than what they couldn't do, all that kind of thing. And it was really, the staff back then were medical professionals, so the nurses and the doctors, and it evolved over the years. And now it's just, we do all kinds of neat things. And I'm sure that he is just thrilled with the concept that he created all those years ago and how it's grown into where we are today.
Isn't that fascinating that the concept of seeing what these kids and these teenagers could do rather than couldn't do is still the backbone of these camps today? Isn't that fascinating?
It is. And I think that one of the things that sets all of the hemophilia camps apart from other programs is that it is about what you can do. It is about learning about your disorder. It is learning about your treatment, where some of the other programs that are out there that are wonderful, for kids that are struggling with other health conditions, but they often are designed to allow kids the opportunity to sort of forget about their disorder, where the hemophilia programs are designed and, to see what you can do and to learn about what it is that you're living with, as well as having a lot of fun. And then I think the other idea too, back then and still, is that it offers a safe reprieve for families. So, maybe mom and dad and others can take a little bit of a break. I think back in the old days of that was certainly part of the concept, so that people could feel comfortable that their kids were in a really safe environment with people that knew about their medical condition. And so it's just kind of evolved from there. And I think it was just an inspiring idea, obviously. And John Penner is also the guy who came up with the concept of the hemophilia treatment centers and really spearheaded that with the government, with other colleagues certainly, but he was integral to that. So a real visionary, I guess, in our community, that's for sure.
So to the group, how did Camp Bold Eagle evolve over the years? You guys are very unique in that you have several programs that have stemmed from the original Camp Bold Eagle, but tell us a little bit about the structure of the original Camp Bold Eagle and how you guys evolved into some of these other programs over the years, and what the need that was created by all of these different camps. So tell me a little bit about the evolution.
So this is Tim. I'll talk a little bit to that. So as Sue talked about early on, it was camp was a place for young guys to go to, a place where they would be safe, not with their parents all the time. So they went to a place to have fun and to still be safe, but to explore what they could do. And then shortly thereafter, just a few years after, I believe in 1972, girls were invited in as well. So girls with hemophilia and von Willebrand's disease and other bleeding disorders came in. And that has grown exponentially throughout the years. And then in the early 80s, Outpost started. So an Eagle Outpost is a leadership camp. We travel around Michigan, and it's getting the kids away from Camp Bold Eagle for a couple of years to train them to be our new staff. So they're 14, 15, then at 16 they can apply to be counselors in training back at Camp Bold Eagle. So it kind of fills itself. So we work up the staff from within through the Outpost program, and then our expedition program as well, where they learn leadership and team building through whitewater rafting and sea kayaking, and then Outpost or Eagle Quest, where they learn about independence and working in a group setting in a very, very rustic setting on North Manitou Island, where there's no electricity, there's only filtered water, and it's all backwoods camping and hiking. And so all of this helps to feed back into our community for our future leaders, our future board members, and our future staff for camp, and trying to bring them back. And so campers who have gone to camp their entire lives and are now CITs or counselors or program staff, and it really helps build up the program. And this is actually the first year that we ever had 4 cabins of girls. So that was pretty impressive. We had almost as many girls at session 2 of Camp Bold Eagle as we had boys, and that was pretty cool.
That's great. Do you guys have siblings attend camp?
We don't. There may be 1 or 2 special cases that sneak in, but in general, no, we don't have siblings. It's just children with bleeding disorders.
And that's been has that been just a policy since the camp was created?
Pretty much, yeah. Would love to start a new siblings camp or a family camp where they can come as well. But as far as our space constraints and just the ability for not only those campers that have bleeding disorders to get away and to just be with other kids that also have bleeding disorders, but also for those siblings who don't, to have more of that one-on-one time with their parents that a lot of times the kids with bleeding disorders get to have, whether it be during clinic visits or doctor's appointments or or even just infusion time. They get a lot more of that one-on-one time, and their unaffected siblings a lot of times don't. So that's at least how I justify it when I say I'm sorry that your brother or sister can't come to camp.
Annie, this next question is for you. How important to the HTC team has camp been for you all clinically? What is the value of camp to you guys in the clinic?
Oh, it's so valuable. Not only does it teach the kids independence, but it also teaches the parents independence, or how to not be the kids be so dependent on them. So when they go to camp, the nurses work with them at camp, and a lot of kids actually learn to self-infuse at camp. And they have many memories of this, and they're all very proud of it. And they get, there's 2 different awards, I believe. And Tim, you can tell me if I'm right. The Dragonfly Award, which is when you have all the knowledge of infusing, but you haven't done it yet. And then the Butterfly Award, which is a big one, where you actually learn how to self-infuse at camp. And they come back, and they're so proud to show the staff that they're able to do this. And then they're actually more compliant with their treatments because they own it, and they're independent, and it helps them grow up a lot.
Do you, what about the relationships between the kids and the clinicians? Do you feel like it fosters more of an open relationship, or more of a comfortable relationship when they come back to clinic year after year?
Yeah, I definitely see that. Well, I go to camp as well as our nurses go. So having the nurses, I think it's always great for the kids to see the medical staff outside of a medical setting, because they kind of see us more as people rather than, people that are there to torture them or poke them or, tell them what to do all the time. And when our medical staff is there, they see us as more humans and having fun, and and they can relate to us better. And kids who go to camp tend to open up more when they come to their appointments. And I can definitely see the difference in kids who haven't attended camp, and then they go, and then they come back for an appointment, and they're so excited to tell us about all their experiences. And it definitely makes a huge difference. And if a kid is interested and a parent is hesitant, we try everything in our power to get that kid to go to camp, because it really does make a huge difference.
Mm. Corey, what was camp like for you as a kid? Do you have memories that stood out?
Yeah, I got a lot of memories. Where did I start? Yeah, like Annie was saying, self-infusion. My mom tried getting me to poke myself at home, and that was it was pretty rough on her, I think. It was just kind of scary. So when I came to camp and I seen other people infusing themselves, it was kind of more comforting. And my uncle was a camp counselor as well, and he would let me poke him and kind of show me how. So that helped a lot. But I've learned so much through camp. Such as like first time like canoeing or kayaking, learn how to swim, build a fire, just so much, so many life skills, along with memories with just friends that became family over the years. I talk to other people at other camps, and it just seems like we have such a strong bond at this camp, and it's like, hey, I'm going to hang out with my family for a month, which is it's great. So it's cool, and you get a lot of support out of it, and a lot of opportunities. A lot of my favorite memories come from Camp Bold Eagle.
Tim, you mentioned before that, in particular, Eagle Outpost, I believe, was created to build leadership from within, from campers. Explain a little bit to our listeners about how that is important and kind of the magic of that, of having a lot of counselors and leadership at camp, be former campers, members of the community. Talk a little bit about the importance of that.
it's so important. I grew up going to just a church camp, so I had a great time and I loved it. And I would go back year after year. So from about 10 years old, and I went all the way up through when I was 17. So when I was 15, 16, 17, I kind of double dipped in the camp well. But so coming back year after year, it was nice to see the one or two friends that would come back, and it was nice to see the one or two staff members that came back from the year prior. And then at 15, when I started going to Eagle Outpost, and then the year after as a CIT at Camp Bold Eagle, I would come back year after year after year, and I saw 60 to 75, even 80% of the staff and campers coming back year after year after year. And so after just a week, you feel like you know these people so well. But when you see them coming back year after year, and you get summer after summer after summer with them in that concentrated setting of camp, you really do see the group become more like family. And you have those close bonds in just a week, but when you have it over and over again, it's amazing the relationships you're able to foster, and really the buy-in and the commitment that you have from the staff is just unparalleled.
Corey, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well about the importance of having staff come from within.
I think it's good because they know what the campers are going through when they come there. Sometimes it's their first time, and they're really young when they start. I've had campers really nervous and scared first time home away from their parents, and kind of just helps them. It reassures them like you went through the same thing. They also know about hemophilia as well, so they can kind of teach them a little bit about taking care of themselves and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I can speak a little bit from experience of watching, a 7-8-year-old come to camp and see this cool teenager and this cool young adult that's paying attention to them, that understands the very unique things about hemophilia and self-infusion, and just the power of that, to watch that kid just start to become more comfortable in this thing that they're going to, deal with for the rest of their life. It's just this magical thing. So I know a lot of camps are moving away from, having, volunteer-run camps and staff. And so I just, there's such a value to having those homegrown staff members. So I just love that Camp Bold Eagle has a program, that is, all about that. I think that's wonderful. Tim, you mentioned this, that you didn't go to hemophilia camp until you were a teenager. Did you wish you had gone as a kid? Do you feel like you've missed out on anything in particular in that little chunk of life? What are your thoughts about that?
Now I think, yes, I definitely missed something. If for no other reason than the memories of past campsites, because we haven't always been at this campground, but we've been there ever since I started in 2000. And meeting a lot of these guys, like meeting Corey and a lot of the other guys who are now in their 30s. Sorry to call you out, Corey. But meeting them and really growing up with them. So even though we were able to spend a lot of those really important years together, I don't remember Corey from when he was a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or whatever. And it would have been cool to have kind of that experience. Having said that, I'm not super bummed, because I know him now, and I know the other men and women now who have gone to camp, and the time that I have spent there has been so saturated and so beneficial, and it's really shaped me into who I am today, that I don't regret when I started. It would have been nice to have tacked a few years on there, but I just have to keep going longer now.
I like it. I like it. This is a question for everybody. Just kind of talking about the regional camp and chapter network. Camp nowadays is a program pillar for just about every regional chapter across the country. But I could imagine that it didn't start out that way. And so I guess this could be directed to Sue, since you outed yourself as the oldest person on our call today. When did bleeding disorder camps become more aware of each other and sharing resources? Do you remember that time? What was that time like?
You know what? It's funny because I know a lot of people, and it's interesting because everybody's so proud of their camp program, and as they should be. It's really cool. But back when I was around the first time at HFM and camp, there were not nearly as many programs in the 80s, and we actually used to have kids come from overseas and from multiple states that would come to Camp Bold Eagle. And Tim actually and Corey may be aware of when some of the other camp programs came about, but something that did happen in the early 90s is actually, when we were talking about all the staff that we have and how wonderful it is that we have people from within the community that are a part of the camp program, which I think is instrumental to our success. We also ran into difficulty because, as we know, our community was so devastated by HIV. And so I think it was 1994, because it was the same year we started at the campsite that we still are using, the one that Tim mentioned that we've been at for a really long time, obviously, since 94 is quite a while. And a lot of our leadership at camp was ill, and people could not continue or, serving in these roles. So we ended up working with the University of Michigan through one of our physicians who had hoped to be on the call, but she's up in the Upper Peninsula, and her cell phone is not that great, I guess, from up there where she's with her family. And she was a resident with U of M and came to the camp and helped, and then, as one of the physicians. And she ended up really being instrumental in creating a program with U of M's fourth-year medical students to come to camp, and they serve as counselors. And then we also have residents and fellows from U of M and other universities as well. It's just that we started the program with University of Michigan, and now it's expanded to some other universities and students. And it's been remarkable. It's a great partnership where we have people who are going to be or are doctors and learning about hemophilia and other bleeding disorders and living with kids, which is something they probably won't be doing in their pediatric practice by any means. So it's been this wonderful program that was created back in the mid-90s because of all the challenges that we were facing as a community, and it's continued today. And it's just a beautiful, I think, way to create relationships with our community and the medical community that's very different than, we would typically have. Other camps starting, Tim and Corey, maybe you remember a bit of that when some of that was coming about, or have you heard some of the history of some of the other programs?
I just got. So go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I have not. I don't know the history of too many of them.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know a few of them started like, what was it? Camp Honors 25th anniversary was last year. I was out there. I just got introduced to a lot of them probably about 4 years ago, so I'm not sure on the history of a lot of them.
So, well, a lot of them did come about because of, I think, Bold Eagle and the success and all of the programming that we've now been able to create, and we are thrilled about it. And I know with NACHO and some of the other programs that are happening, it's just amazing to see what's happened, and that it's a place for kids no matter what. I mean, we have kids from all of our treatment centers. We're fortunate to have 9 treatment centers in Michigan, and kids are invested in coming, and our HTCs work with us, and often these are kids that maybe wouldn't have an opportunity other than, they happen to be kind of lucky, I guess. They have a bleeding disorder, so they get to come to Camp Bold Eagle and then Eagle Outpost and then Quest and Expedition and all the 7 weeks of camp that we offer. So,
Sue, you mentioned NACHO. Tim, will you share a little bit with our listeners about what the NACHO program conference is? I think a lot of community members, maybe new parents, don't know about just the uniqueness of this training for camp staff in the hemophilia space. So tell us a little bit about NACHO.
Absolutely. So I've been honored to be able to be on the NACHO committee the past few years, and it's run through the Arizona Hemophilia Association, and it is a camping conference for bleeding disorder organizations. So NACHO is North American Camping Conference of Hemophilia Organizations, and so it's a amazing conference where all of these bleeding disorder camps from North America and all around the world share ideas, share what has worked for them, what hasn't, getting advice, and we also bring in camping professionals and national camp speakers that go to the American Camping Association conferences and do staff training all around the U.S. and all around the world as well, to give a lot of camps training that they wouldn't typically be able to do. And so they fly them all in, and we're very blessed at Camp Bold Eagle to have been around so long, to have such an extensive program, and a lot of the camps are starting next year or have started just a few years ago. And maybe they're the staff at their treatment center or the staff at their chapter is pretty limited, and so they rely heavily on volunteers. And so this is a nice concentrated effort to get all of this information which typically would cost thousands of dollars for a lot of those trainings.
It's a completely unique experience. It's specialized in hemophilia bleeding disorder camps, and now it's global. Global camps now attend the conference regularly, which is super cool. And it's also, as you can imagine, it's a hoot. It's just a bunch of camp people, it's one of the most fun weekends of the year. So it's a cool resource. Yeah.
It's amazing. At one point, we got stuck in an elevator because we were at a session, and the speaker said, a friend of mine got stuck in an elevator, but they were with camp people, and they had such a great time. And immediately after that session, we got stuck in an elevator full of camp people. But there was probably 11 of us in this elevator, and we had an absolute ball while we were waiting for them to get us out. So we were in there with less than 2-year-old. Our son Charlie was with us as well while we were stuck there. But we all had fun doing camp games and singing camp songs, and and that's just in the worst situation. And so all the rest of the time is in pretty much the best situation, sharing ideas and just having a great time with all of these camp experts and camp volunteers. And it's January in Arizona, so that's not too bad either.
Yes, that's the other draw. It is January in Arizona. No, it's wonderful. As we kind of wrap up, I would love to hear in particular about your med student program. You guys have a very unique program, and I think it contributes to bleeding disorder care as a whole. So I would love to hear a little bit about it. Whoever wants to take the baton and tell us about your med student program.
Well, that was the thing I was kind of talking about earlier. This is Sue. But I think one of the interesting things is we do a lot with med students. And Tim could talk about that. Not only do we have med students that we work with at camp, but we also do presentations at some of the med schools in Michigan. And then I know that Tim and Jenna have med students that they welcome into their home to learn about hemophilia and what it's like to live with a chronic condition. So Tim, maybe you can share a little bit more. As I was talking about, we use the med students at camp, and then they actually get credit for it. So they get it's kind of a cool program because they're supervised by a physician at U of M. Right now, our camp director is Dr. Amy Hepper, and she happens to be married to a guy who has hemophilia, and she is the physician who supervises the med students, and the med students have to report out to her after the end of the program, that kind of thing, what their experience was like, what they learned, etc. But we do all kinds of things with med students. It's kind of like the swim program. It's gone beyond what we had originally intended, and kind of organically become all these other things, which is very cool. So I guess I'm taking over the interviewing aspect and suggesting that Tim could talk a little bit about some of the other stuff too, in addition to the med students at camp.
Well, Sue, thank you for your question. We've had the med student rotation for I think 24 years, so 25 summers now, and they come in as cabin counselors. So a lot of them, as they come in, they're thinking, all right, I'm going to go in, going to work in the health center. We tell them beforehand, but they, even afterwards, they say, even after you told me that, I didn't realize. I mean, we're in the cabins. We are the counselors, and so they're paired up with returning counselors that have bleeding disorders, along with CITs that have bleeding disorders, and other volunteers from the community. And a lot of times, even though it's the med students' first year at camp, a lot of times they're kind of the senior counselors, as far as the other staff will look up to them because they are a bit older. And so they come in and they have a really unique experience to med school. It's one of their rotations one of their elective rotations that they're able, as Sue said, to get credit for. And we talked about how quickly you become friends with people just after a week while at camp. Well, they're there for 2.5 weeks, and it's just amazing to see what they bring year after year to camp and what they get out of it as well. They often talk about how they find themselves singing camp songs in the hospital hallways after camp, and then they'll pass somebody that they were on the camp rotation with, and they have a nice moment, or somebody says something about announcements, and they start even just to themselves singing the announcement song. And so these aren't all med students that are going into pediatrics. They're going into all different medical fields, and so suddenly we have doctors going out all over the country and all over the world that have an intimate knowledge of bleeding disorders, whereas typically in med school they spend part of a day on bleeding disorders as a whole, and now they have intimate knowledge about bleeding disorders and treatment for it, and specifically what the kids do when they're not getting treated, when they're not seen at the hospital. And that's really cool. It's a really cool program, and it's a program that saved Camp Bold Eagle back in the 90s when all of our returning staff were passing away due to complications with HIV and hepatitis, and those that were still around were just too weak to chase after the kids who now were very healthy because they were able to treat prophylactically. And so with the counselors trying to keep up with them, that was really tough. And so the med student program came in and essentially saved Camp Bold Eagle, and that's pretty amazing. And then, as Sue said, we go to different med schools and share about bleeding disorders and share about what it's like to live with a bleeding disorder. And a lot of med students that we've talked to have talked about how hearing from a patient is really impactful. They often have patient studies and or patient guest lectures or whatever it may be. And it's really impactful to put a face to this data or this information that they're getting.
That's just fantastic. That is just fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That's just great. Kind of to wrap up our conversation today, I'd love for this to be a general question for anybody, but what do you think your community would be like without camp? If it all went away, one day if we didn't have the funding for it, if we didn't have the organizations to support it and to run it, what would it be like to grow up with a bleeding disorder without camp? And Tim, I'd love to start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, a lot of times we talk about how camp is not the place. We love the place we go to. We go to Pioneer Trails in West Michigan, and it's gorgeous, and it's on a gorgeous lake. But camp is not a place. It's the people. And so even when we get together outside of camp, we were able to share a lot of those memories and we get a lot of that impactful connections that we would get at camp. Having said that, if we would have that and we have those memories, and so for the next generation coming up without camp, thankfully the next generation is in a pretty good place as far as new medications and new treatments for bleeding disorders, but that's not all camp is about. And so even though we would go on, I think we as in general wouldn't be as a community as a whole in as good a spot without camp. I mean, we teach about managing bleeding disorders, but as we talked about, we also teach about independence and leadership and working as a team. You learn so many things at camp that we don't schedule for. We don't schedule for, all right, today they're going to learn how to pack their own clothes up or how to get all of their stuff together to go to the bathhouse or whatever it may be. And so, I mean, I'd love to hear if Sarah has anything just coming as a non-bleeder. Sorry to call you out as a non-bleeder, Sarah, but
everybody's calling each other out today. It's great. It's great.
It's okay. I accept it.
It's mostly me calling people out. So as camp director, I feel like that's my role. The bleeding disorder community later, as far as the camping goes, and what it's like now as opposed to what it was like before camp.
Yeah, I know that I'm a non-bleeder, but it's really interesting being in a family with someone who's affected and with one I didn't know about camp. Coming from Maryland and my sister having von Willebrand disease, I had really no idea about anything. We weren't really connected with a foundation there. She didn't go to an HTC at the time, and so I was really in the dark. I didn't know anyone else who had this. And so, I grew up without camp, even as just a sibling. I know siblings don't come to Camp Bold Eagle, but I grew up without it. And when I came as a staff member, I was just blown away by all of the people and the type of community that's created with camp. And even to this day, when you hear people talk about the bleeding disorders community and how amazing it is, you'll probably hear them mention camp because of what it does for the relationships, the amount of time that you get to spend with each other, the understanding that comes with it. And you don't really get that at many other events. Even when you get to spend a weekend together at a conference, the type of relationship building that you get at camp is just a little bit different. And so as a sibling coming to camp, I was introduced to this world in a really beautiful way. And now the way camp works is, it just wraps you in. And so I will forever, I feel, be part of the bleeding disorders community because of it. And so I can't really imagine for kids growing up with a bleeding disorder missing out on that type of community and support system.
Love that. Would anyone else like to offer some thoughts? What would it be like without bleeding disorder camp?
I can. So I think it would be really devastating to especially in the pediatric population, because that's something that we always use to have something the kids look forward to. And also when we have newly diagnosed patients, as we transition them into their care and everything, we can tell them or their parents, like, here are the things, we know you've been diagnosed with a bleeding disorder, but here are some things that you can look forward to. And camp's always one of those things. And just the experience that and the relationships that all the kids we see with bleeding disorders get from camp. It's so important in the community, and it's so important because this isn't something, like, I've worked in oncology, and while that's devastating as well, it's not something that you're faced with the rest of your life. Hemophilia at this point doesn't go away, and to form bonds with other people who have bleeding disorders like they do at camp is so important to their mental health.
Corey, you've probably got something to say.
Yeah, I think camp would probably be really sad and boring. Life would be really sad and boring without camp. I don't know, like it's changed me a lot for the better. It's introduced me to so many different opportunities in my life, and I guess I can say this for a lot of the kids. It really does change your life. Some of the kids, they don't come from such best backgrounds, and I feel like having role models in their lives at camp really helps them out, and especially on top of it with having hemophilia. I talked to some of the people at camp. I had relatives with hemophilia, so I kind of grew up with others with hemophilia, but others aren't as fortunate as that, so they don't know nothing. They come into this world knowing nothing about hemophilia, and it's really helped them out through their life and growing up with it. We're very fortunate to have camp.
Corey, one of the things I love is I always hear about certain campers that come to camp and they can't wait to see you. I'm thinking about Dylan and a lot of the other guys, and Corey is a lot of fun. He sounds pretty serious on this podcast. Brutal.
I'm nervous.
When you meet him in person, there's not a nervous bone in his body when he's at camp, I think. So, and I just have to say that one of my favorite things about camp is the camaraderie that I have witnessed over the years. And it's like I always say, you know what, if folks went to camp together, they don't even care if they really like each other. They'll be there for each other. If someone has an issue or a problem or a flat tire or whatever it is, these guys will stop whatever they're doing and help out that other individual. And I think that is just one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And I love it. And I think that it's such a beautiful, beautiful experience that we're able to help create, but it's really the people who make it happen. And those are all the folks that are involved. And I'm just grateful that we have the opportunity to share this with so many people in the community. We had well over 200 campers this year and our CITs, and then doesn't even count all our counseling staff. And we just are really, really fortunate to be able to offer this. And I'm grateful to everybody who participates and helps lead the effort. So we love
and Amy
journeys.
At this point, Amy, I think you'll realize when I said that this conversation could go on forever, because once you start getting these camp people talking about how much they love camp, it really honestly could never end. And that's, I think, says it all.
I just want to thank every one of you for taking the time to share with the community at large. Maybe there's some parents that have a newly diagnosed little dude or a little girl, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for opening that world of camp up to new folks. Congratulations on your 50th anniversary. That is incredible, and thank you for sharing your story with us. This community has gone through so much, and to see a program that has stood the test of time and grown and evolved is really wonderful. I know you guys are one of the leaders in the community in terms of the camp program, so I just thank you, and I just want to say hats off to all of the hard work that you guys do. Listeners, if you have interest in camp, please check with your local chapter. You can also check with HFA and NHF. They have a pretty comprehensive list of all the bleeding disorder camps that are happening across the country. Camp season is coming to an end, but next year is full throttle, so make sure you guys plan your week at Hemophilia Bleeding Disorder Camp. And again, thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. This has just been one of my favorite conversations, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that is all for episode 30 of the Ask the Expert podcast series. We are going to be back next month with another expert interview, and we are looking forward to having you join us in the conversation.
Have you checked out Living with Hemophilia yet? If you have, kudos to you. Not only are you eager to join the exciting community of discourse and helpful information, you're also a keen listener and patron of the arts. But if you haven't taken a swim through livingwithhemophilia.com, take a moment to pull it up on the ol' internet. I think you'll love it. Helpful content, relevant updates, and, most of all, a bunch of people going through the same things you are. It's a growing part of the online Living with Hemophilia community, brought together by the good people at Bayer. Also, put it on your Facebook to-do list. Hit the like button on the Living with Hemophilia Facebook page. It's a good alternative to looking at the slideshow of your neighbor's recent foot surgery. I mean, unless you're into that sort of thing. Living with Hemophilia from Bayer. Check it out.
Bloodstreammedia.com is your one-stop shop for all of Bloodstream Media's podcasts for the bleeding disorder community.
Once on bloodstreammedia.com, don't forget to follow the links to subscribe to the Bloodstream podcast, Ask the Expert podcast, the Powering Through podcast, and the Bloodline podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have an idea for a future episode of Ask the Expert? Have a question that you would like to hear an expert answer?
Email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. You'll also find Bloodstream Media on facebook.com/bloodstreammedia and on Twitter @bloodstreaminfo.
This episode of Ask the Expert was written by Amy Board.
Produced by Patrick James Lynch, Rob Bradford,
Joshua Sterling Bragg,
Avra Friedman,
and Colby Crow. Artwork by Katie Wright Mead
and Ryan Giel.
And the Ask the Expert podcast is edited by Allison Stoney.
I'm your host, Amy Board, and until next time, embrace that mystery and fear of life. You are not alone.